I'm a music teacher in Providence, Rhode Island. I've just finished my 6th year of teaching. I'm a middle school music teacher. I teach band and chorus. On the union side of things, I currently hold the position of treasurer in the Providence Teachers Union, and I'm also on the Committee on Political Education. Well, I think one of the things that we've had in Rhode Island is we're 5 years into our current education commissioner, Commissioner Deborah Gist, and she has a different kind of idea of how labor management collaboration works. In my opinion, her idea is management says what's going to happen, and labor has to deal with it. And it really doesn't really line up with a lot of the things that we've been working with at Turn. So what we've kind of been learning about and noticing in Rhode Island is that kind of top-down mantra is kind of starting to finish out, or it's beginning to be played out. So in our state, we've had a couple of things happen over the course of the last year between education policy and education legislation. The first thing that happened was, and this relates to the Common Core, is that our state had approved a high-stakes test to be used as a graduation requirement, the NECAP exam. And there was a great debate going on with it, and to make a long story short, what ended up happening at the end of the legislative session, the General Assembly passed a 3-year moratorium on using any high-stakes assessment as a graduation requirement. So that currently includes the NECAP exam, but it also allows us to kind of implement the Common Core without using a PARCC assessment for a graduation requirement. So that's really, I was very pleased about that, because I feel that one of the detractors of a successful implementation of Common Core is jumping immediately into using the assessments when we haven't fully rolled out the standards. So that was the first thing that we viewed that happened. The second thing that happened was around teacher evaluation. And in Rhode Island, we have a yearly teacher evaluation process that focuses 51% of the evaluation on student learning objectives. Rhode Island did not make the mistake of using the VAM, the student progress scores that other states and other districts are using that are currently in litigation or being turned over by courts. But in Rhode Island, we have these yearly teacher evaluations, and what we found was that these evaluations, because they're being done yearly, are taking away from teachers who really need support to grow in the profession. So our General Assembly again stepped in, kind of undid some of the things that our commissioner was doing and created a cyclical process for teacher evaluation. But what I think the good thing about this is that, again, it's another opportunity to allow teachers to kind of focus on implementation of the Common Core rather than jumping to assessment immediately through their SLOs or through high-stakes testing, to be able to kind of get into the standards and find out what's really working in their practice. So that's kind of where we're going in terms of a statewide level. In terms of our district and with professional development, our district has formed a couple of joint committees. We have a teacher program committee, and we have a district professional development committee that is a kind of a collaboration between labor and management. And what we're seeing is a good use of sharing across schools in our district. We have 39 schools. So we're seeing a good use through common planning of shared lesson planning and shared implementation standards. Is it perfect across the board? Absolutely not. But we feel like we've been doing an adequate job of implementing those standards, and I think being given a little bit more time will allow us to be more successful. So that's kind of an overview of what's been going on. I absolutely see both components were a product of labor management collaboration. The first one, and I have to give her credit, our superintendent, Dr. Susan Lucy, she did a fantastic job of being a driver of this change in a time where it's very the environment and the atmosphere to go for an administrator to go against our state commissioner. Our superintendent was the only superintendent in the state to actually speak out against the high stakes testing graduation requirement. It really put her in some political heat. However, in our district in Providence, which we're the largest district in the state, our union president, our union, our school board president, our superintendent, and our mayor all felt that using high stakes testing as a graduation requirement was inappropriate at this time. So we really were able to kind of work forward with that. With the teacher evaluation component, we were also successful in doing that because, as I stated earlier, we're currently negotiating a new contract. And some of the ideas that we've been putting forth in negotiations were around using, fruitful evaluations as a way for a teacher to essentially be looked at differently and be treated as a professional through things such as compensation and time and professional development. So some of the language that actually went into that bill was written by our negotiating committee and was submitted to the General Assembly. So it was really, this victory was a victory for the state of Rhode Island, but it was really on the backs of Providence from both the management side and from the labor side. I think it really is about relationship building. I think where we are is we're in the third year with this superintendent, and we kind of made this a commitment from the day she started that this was kind of the direction between our union president and her. What we're kind of in the process of doing is, for us right now, it's not so much about keeping that relationship through change, but keeping that relationship over time. With certain individuals, it's kind of a constant massaging of relationships to kind of make sure that you're there, where you can disagree in one area and you can be really upset in another area, but then you sit down at the table and we're in it together. I think the best way to describe it is maybe at a more micro level. I went to a labor management collaboration meeting with my principal about 3 years ago. And we sat down at the table, and Patrick Dolan was doing a little workshop, a little think tank kind of thing. And she wrote down something on a piece of paper, and I actually kept it. It's somewhere in this room. It said, "We won't let each other fail." And I think that labor and management, if they come to the table and they say, "We can't let each other fail." So, the worst thing I think that our union could have would be a really weak superintendent. And I think the worst thing for our superintendent, and it would really be a strong example, through the way that I just described our legislative process, if we had a weak teachers union, our superintendent would be, not the superintendent of schools. She'd probably be out of a job and seeking employment outside of Rhode Island. So I think having strong sides at both, at the table really can drive that collaboration. So it's massaging relationships, but it's about being as strong as possible from both sides. It's not all ice cream sundaes, it's pretty bad sometimes, and sometimes you get really frustrated, and it really can be difficult. But it's really like any it's a long-term relationship, and you have valleys, you have peaks and you have valleys, but I think that's really what the undermining goal is that when you step back from it and you say, well, this is somebody I can actually go to, where I know when I first came into Providence, that was not the situation. I remember the first school committee meeting I ever went to was actually at my school, the school that I was teaching at. And the reason why I was there was the school board was trying to close the school. They didn't really know why. They didn't have any reason, but they wanted to. Right. So in order to kind of, in SOS, save our schools, I threw together my ragtag band and we performed for the school board. And then, so we did that first, and then our union president got up, and I had never met him before, but I knew him because he was a state legislator who had a pretty strong reputation. And he got up and started screaming at the superintendent and the school board and was actually suing them in Superior Court and was trying to have an injunction filed and a whole mess of other things. That was my first school board meeting when I was 21 years old. So this is not, we weren't there 6 years ago. we've come a long way. It's not a perfect world. We're not ABC unified yet, that's for sure. But we're getting to a point where we can have those situations. I'm interested, though. We just had a leadership change in the union side. Our union president retired. He's moved on to a different kind of union work in a different sector. But his vice president has now become the president. And she's really done a good job of kind of coming in and being that strong voice at the table. However, I'm not going to lie, I'm scared to death what happens when we do have an administrative change. If we do in the next year, and like I said earlier, we have a very interesting mayoral race right now going on. We don't know if there will be a change in the high level administrators, kind of offices. So if we do, we're definitely going to push for an administrator who's strong but is willing to kind of continue this work. And if they're not, we're going to have to push them in that direction one way or another, because I don't see an adversarial relationship being anything that's fruitful for either side in the environment that we're in.